Bob Thompson joins us once again here on Sikkim 365 Radio and 365 Sports. A new friend we've made here, retired president of Fox Sports Networks and Fox Sports International and a Thompson Sports Group LLC now. And Bob, this Big Ten TV deal is really massive, $7-8 billion between there. You had actually texted me and Smokey a week ago about, kind of the overall number that was not really going to hit $100 million per school, but this is still per school like a gigantic amount of money that they're going to be getting. Why was the Big Ten able to position themselves so well, even beyond the SEC, which has had far more success, at least with individual schools across the board in their conference?
Right. I think that one of the reasons the Big Ten was so successful was that, Kevin Warren, their commissioner, came in with an NFL mentality as to how the television deal should go. And he was able to attract all three broadcast networks, or three of the four, everyone except ABC, to create almost an NFL type Saturday for the Big Ten. So you'll have the early game with Fox, preceded by the pregame show. Then you'll have the afternoon 3:30 Eastern window with CBS, and then you'll go into a primetime game with NBC, just like the NFL does on Sunday. So I think that created a situation, as far as for the SEC, it was already pretty much in place. And I think these other networks knew that if they wanted a piece of one of the two preeminent conferences, they were going to have to go into the Big Ten, and that's why I think NBC and CBS stepped up to the way they did.
Do you see anybody making a fundamental shift in what they're doing programming-wise outside of NBC with now adding a game? They've only been doing one college football game every couple of weeks, really, with Notre Dame.
Right. I could see NBC potentially going back to the Big 12 and trying to find another afternoon game to air in those days where those Saturdays that NBC or that Notre Dame isn't playing. That way they'd have a doubleheader every Saturday afternoon leading into the Saturday night game, which they're clearly setting up as something similar to the Sunday night in America NFL game that they promote incessantly. And I think that makes sense. CBS, are they going to go back to the well? I don't know. They've always been pretty happy with just that one game in the 3:30 Eastern window. So I don't know if they step their toes in anymore. I think Fox probably wants some more games, either for FS1 or maybe for Fox, the second game on Saturday on the broadcast network. So I think they could be interested in Big 12. As far as the Pac-12, I think, ESPN is the clear, favorite for out there to bite off the biggest piece of the package. But again, Fox could use some games for FS1 in that 10:30 Eastern window as well. So there could be some significant interest from a couple of folks on the Pac-12 as well.
I think I may have asked you this before, but to me, I think it's kind of pretty interesting that the Big Ten is at least in some way copying the NFL model where, on Saturdays, if you want to watch if you're going to watch on network television, you're going to watch it, 3 games and 3 good games. You're going to watch on CBS, you're going to watch on Fox, and then you're going to turn on NBC at night and watch that big game. That they are kind of saying, we want your Saturdays in the Big Ten just like your Sundays in the NFL.
Absolutely. I mean, you're going to wake up and for those of us out here on the Pacific Coast, it's at 9 o'clock and they got you till, 8 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. All you got to do is change the channel, twice. So I think for the Big Ten, it's a great model. I think you'll see an unprecedented, at least in the college area, promotional partnership between the 3 broadcast networks that are involved in this. You see it you see it in the NFL, where CBS and Fox and NBC all promote each other's games. I think you'll see it in the college world as well, which you really haven't seen up to this point.
Why did the streaming part not go to Amazon and Apple, you think? Do you think they weren't as interested as the Big Ten wanted them to be?
That's possible. They certainly, I'm told, were, involved in bidding. They just can't seem to get over that hurdle. And Peacock probably was in a position in combination with the NBC deal to pay the most money. And, that's a good package for Peacock. They have the eight games, 4 conference, 4 non-conference exclusively, along with they'll probably stream 1 exclusive Notre Dame game every year. So that's a pretty good package, especially when you add the Big Ten basketball into the mix. But, as far as Amazon and Apple, it's like, okay, next, let's go to the next one. Sooner or later they'll get a hit. But right now, I think the conferences are just more comfortable with the existing broadcast ecosystem, along with their cable partners and the broadcaster streaming outlets.
For all the talk about how distribution has changed with streaming and, 1,000 cable channels and everything that you do have, at the end of the day, when it comes down to live sports, the broadcast networks still do matter a ton. I mean, they still get the most eyes. Why has that, with everything that's changed, been able to endure so well?
I think it's because the broadcasters still reach the most homes. You don't need a cable. You don't even need a computer in most places in order to get a broadcast signal. The top 27 of the top 30 shows so far this year are sports events. So clearly the broadcast networks have shown that they can bring to large audiences. And at the end of the day, that's what the conferences want. I mean, they want money, obviously, too, but they want the games exposed to as many people in terms of alumni, in terms of their corporate sponsors, in terms of potential students, and for recruits. And they've hit a home run with this one. I mean, this is the anti-streaming deal. 3 broadcast networks is, just a tremendous feat that the Kevin and the conference were able to pull off.
Is this also for the Big Ten and all that kind of a unique time to make a deal with broadcast networks, as you see so many big streamers trying to reorganize what they're doing? HBO Max, Discovery, whatever that's going to be is in flux. Netflix is in flux. Now, Amazon and Apple are still, they have the GDP of small countries or medium-sized countries, so it doesn't matter to them. But with all that going on, was this fortuitous for the Big Ten that those things are kind of happening in the background with streaming?
I think so. With it being a 7-year deal, there could be some rationalization of the whole streaming business in that time frame, and then they'll be able to take another look in 2030 when the deal's up. Still, though, they have dipped their toe into the water, so they're going to get some experience with Peacock and how that all works out, and what kind of problems that may or may not cause in terms of distribution, and how unhappy fans may or may not be if their game gets put on Peacock on any given Saturday. So we'll have to see. I think, for Amazon and Apple, like you said, they've got more money than anyone can imagine. And sooner or later, they'll just overpay for it just to get a hold of something. And there's no doubt in my mind that will happen at some point. It's just not this time.
I had a friend who was a Major League Baseball player, and he went into salary arbitration one year, and he said it's the worst thing that ever happened to him, because you go into a team that you love playing for, and then they essentially tell you, like, listen, we really like you, we love you, we want you back on the team, but you can't hit left-handed pitching, in August and September, you kind of slow down, here's all the reasons we don't want to give you what you think you're worth. Is that what the Pac-12 and Big 12 are kind of in for in these negotiations, as they try to ask for a raise, from their last TV deal, but also knowing that their conferences are not what they were when the last TV deal was made?
It would be my expectation that they're going to get some of the "we love you" but conversation. But I still think both conferences have significant value to add. The West Coast schools, they've got some good programs out there. They've got the 10:30 Eastern time zone, and I think that's going to be appealing to some folks. The Big 12 is the same thing. I mean, picking up the 4 new schools, while losing Oklahoma and Texas is tough, I think what they've put together is a very significant package of schools that have wide appeal from Utah to Florida, and that's a great thing. I think these guys, both the Pac-12 and the Big 12, might have to be flexible. Maybe some Friday night games, maybe some Thursday night games. in order to, reap the kind of dollars they hope to get. I could see a streaming package being a bigger part, say ESPN Plus with the Big 12, which they currently have, or ESPN Plus, Apple, Amazon on the Pac-12 deal. So there's some ways for them to, distinguish themselves from the others, but they're going to have to be flexible and do some things to create value that they probably haven't done in the past.
If the college football playoff expands, and there's some talk that maybe they might bring that up about expanding it before 2026, does that help the Big 12 and Pac-12 in their negotiations if it happens before that, they make a deal?
I don't know if it helps them a whole lot. I'm not sure I see that happening early, because at that point, you probably got ESPN as the only bidder. Maybe contractually, or maybe I'm wrong and they have to open it up to everybody. But I think they're going to get a healthy payday no matter what after 2026. But I don't think it opens up earlier.
And last question. So short-term deal here on the Big Ten, and the SEC deal is still. Then they've got longer. I think 3 years after that. Is that pretty smart, or do you think the SEC will maybe go back to the table and say, hey, when the playoff thing happens or anything changes, can we up our money a little bit too from ESPN?
That's absolutely possible. The different entities, though, remember the CFPs through the the alliance, or whatever you want to call the people behind this college football playoff, and then the SEC deal is specifically with the SEC. So yeah, that could happen. 2032, and they're a little behind what the Big Ten's going to be, but I don't see it as significant dollars. And with the 2-year window on the tail, it's not that long. If they're out to 2036 like the ACC, then I might start thinking about, is there a way to open this up and get more value? And like I've said all along, that conferences and their broadcast partners talk all the time. And if there is some way that ESPN sees some value in opening up the agreement earlier and potentially adding dollars to it, if it makes sense for them, based on that value that's going to be added, they'll absolutely do it.
Oh, I have to ask you about the draft that they're going to have for games. Would you have liked to have been part of a draft for picking games, or do you like the old way where it was like, we get this one and you get that one, no matter what?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how that works, because, normally what happens with the conference is this. Prior to the season, there's a number of games selected in advance, maybe the first couple weeks, and special date games like Thanksgiving, day after Thanksgiving, Labor Day, things like that, are picked in advance. And so that's probably the draft they're talking about. And I can only imagine how that's going to work. Then you get into the season after the first few weeks, and then you start going on a 12-day or a 6-day window where the selections are made either 12 days out, 6 days out, and there's a drafting order there. I got to think Fox is going to have the first pick most of the time. They even have the first and second pick sometimes. CBS and NBC might be in some rotating window. NBC games a number of them might be selected in advance because they're prime time games, and that creates a whole different level of issues for the schools when they're moved to prime time, their fans, et cetera. The other big question that's hanging out there is, NBC going to be able to flex games like they can on Sunday night? Are they going to be able to take a game and say, all right, this game's playing on Fox or it's on CBS, but it's such a big deal, we're going to flex it into Saturday night? My guess is they don't, because there's going to be other college football games on Saturday night, whereas with the NFL, NBC is the only game. So, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting draft prior to the season, and then it's going to be an interesting Monday morning phone call during the season.
I would think so. Bob, thank you so much for all the time you always give us and the knowledge that you've brought to us. I think there are a lot of, and you've seen this on Twitter, a lot of people who are aspiring amateur TV executives that haven't gotten their call to the bigs yet. And it's nice to have the information from someone who knows.
My pleasure. Take care.
All right, that's Bob Thompson, former Fox Sports president, with us here on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. More right after this.